And welcome back to another edition of Five Questions with the Paulists. And today, from my hometown of New York City,
Oh,
Father Ricky Manalo.
hey, how's it going, Mike? I didn't know that you were born here.
Well, I was born a little north of there, as my wife will quickly
Uh-huh.
remind us. My wife was born like you
Sure.
in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was born in Yonkers, so I'm not a real New Yorker, but I pretend to be one on
Well,
TV.
that's a New Yorker. I mean, I grew up in New Jersey. I was born in Brooklyn, raised up in Jersey near the Jersey Shore. And for me, everything still, revolves around New York. So I can still consider myself both a New Yorker and a Jerseyite or Jerseyan.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And let's get right into it. Question number one
Sure.
is, you're
Okay.
living back in Manhattan now. So what's your favorite
I
thing about
am.
living back in Manhattan?
I love Manhattan. I mean, it's the best part is having gone to school here and lived in this area. I guess the cultural scene, being able to we have access to some of the best museums in the country, Broadway, symphonic orchestras, the food, the variety of cultures, all of that, everything that New York has to offer. I absolutely love, and I'm an extrovert, so when I came here, or when I envisioned when I was going to move here, I saw myself just like, oh, this is going to be my day off. I'm going to try this neighborhood. I'm going to try that cuisine. I'm going to join that museum membership. I'm going to watch every YouTube video about the best stuff in New York and all of that. So everything that New York offers, which is just rich in so many possibilities. That's the best part of living in New York, if you can put up with it.
Exactly.
I,
Right.
I always say that New York is one of the best cities if you can put up with it. you know,
Indeed. Exactly.
so
And
all of
so,
that.
and so question two, what's the worst part
Uh-huh.
about living in New York right now?
The worst part is that uh, everything I just told you, everything I just told you the last minute or two, they're all closed right now. Well, not all, but yeah. I mean, I came here, um, I settled here, I should say, about the time that shelter in place took place. So it was right in the middle of March. I technically moved here in January, but I was traveling up until March. And by the time I finally settled, we had this shelter in place. And all of a sudden, this city, which I love, I'm walking around during this pandemic and seeing the empty streets, the empty Times Square, if you can believe it. Some of those photos I've been posting in Facebook and early on, just to and not having this, not having the opportunities because of the social distancing and everything else. So it's really been the worst part, of course, that I happened to move here at the at the as we were becoming the epicenter of the world. Outside of this, if the pandemic wasn't here, I was living in San Francisco for 15 years, and I absolutely love the weather and the food there. I'm not looking forward to the weather here when we get into the extremes of summer humidity or the other end of winter and snow. But other than that, I'll spoil them. So who's complaining?
Father Ricky, question three is this time of pandemic a good time to be a liturgical composer like yourself, or is it too stressful to write?
I think that's a great question. I sort of have two parts of that. First, it's a great time, not in the sense that that I would wish a pandemic on the world at any time, but the fact that because of this atmosphere that we're living in, the creative juices are just pouring out of me, these tunes, and I'm hearing constantly these melodies that resonate with my own feelings, my moods, and that it's my way of responding. I'm always hearing, as a composer, I'm always hearing melodies in my head as part of the badness of what it means to be a composer. Even now, I'm hearing music. The difficult part is, while it's very creative, because there always has to be some way I channel out my feelings, I'm not in the mood to actually write it down. Everything that's going on in the world, and what a week we've past few weeks, from the pandemic to racism, to the political scene, to the divisive nation that we live in. All of that, it's not giving me the motivation to actually sit down and transfer what's been going in my head down on ink on paper. So it's kind of that double-edged sword, and I'm not quite sure what to do with that. I suspect I'll eventually uh, take what's in my head, and if it's really good, somehow it'll somehow appear in the future when I'm in the mood to actually write something down. So it's difficult, actually, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. 2020 has kind of been just a depressing year in general, I
Oh,
think.
it
And
really is.
yeah, and I
One on
mean, I
top
know
of
that,
the other.
yeah, and you wrote about the experience that you had in America, of someone, hurling a racial epithet at you during this pandemic.
That's
What,
right.
what's your favorite song or piece of music that helped get you through that time?
There was there was I'm maybe the last 5, 6 years, or maybe longer than that, I rediscovered jazz. I
Ah,
never really liked jazz before. And there's a pianist, jazz pianist, his name is Fred Hirsch, Hersch. I believe he lives in the city. Well, I believe he's from Cincinnati or Cleveland. Anyway, there's a piece of music that a theme that he improvises around. It's called "Black Is the Color," which is based on an Appalachian Scottish tune. And his improvisation of this theme and it really fits what I've been going through. It's really two themes. He begins with this very moody, brooding um, pathos of a melody coming from this Scottish tune, and then he halfway through he transitions into a more hopeful theme, which I don't know what the connection is, but it's the love theme from Spartacus. So he goes from this one very very mournful, soulful sadness melody, and it transitions into this hope-filled, beautiful love theme from Spartacus. And for me, it captures perfectly what I've been going through. I really recommend everyone, Googling that and just listening to this. It really I've been putting it on a loop
mm,
sometimes, 24/7. When my Paulist brother died, Rich Colgan, maybe
yeah.
about a month or a month and a half ago, I kept playing that as my prayer.
Mm.
I guess experiencing the sadness that I was feeling, but then also the sense of hope and resurrection that we all have, especially when we mourn the passing of someone we love. So, so that piece of music comes to mind.
Indeed, I'll check it out.
Yeah, please do. Fred Hirsch, "Black is the Color."
And finally, number five, speaking of hope, what's the number one change that you hope that will, for the better, that will come out of this and at the end of the year?
Well, when it comes to hope, I'm an educator. I like to teach. I like to give talks and presentations. Um, in light of what we've been going through with pandemic, the context we're living in, illness, sickness, and then particularly racism and
Yeah.
xenophobia, which you mentioned, I think if there's any light that's coming out of this, there are a few, but if there's any light for me, it's this understanding that we're learning better. Hopefully, we're learning better um, about these issues. We're educating ourselves. For example, I was having a conversation with a dear friend, and we were talking about George Floyd race riots. We were talking about white privilege, racial structuralism, and all the systemic racism, all of that. And she really didn't know what that meant. She herself is a white woman, so she wasn't quite sure. Well, what does white privilege mean, and what is structural racism? So we had this great conversation, and I hope that we were learning from one another. I was trying to learn why from her particular positionality, how she looked at racism issues. She was understanding my perspective, being Asian American, and I think we came out of that conversation with a better understanding of the other positions. So I think there's dialogue going on. I think there's people are getting more educated about these issues. Part of me says, well, we've had these incidences before, and sometimes we still find ourselves in the same situation, or something tragic like the George Floyd incident happens. But as an educator, I think at least people are learning better. Where that goes, that's where I pray. And I say to myself, gee, even though we learn better, do we actually act upon it? And I think that's what we need to do. But education and awareness is one key element that hopefully the next generation, they won't experience racism or xenophobia. So,
Yeah, that sounds about right. I know for myself, as someone who's worked on a college campus, I don't think I've ever seen African American students as afraid as I've seen them, not even just in the recent months, but in the last 4 years.
yeah,
It's
that's
just
right.
the fear in their eyes has just been so
Uh-huh.
palpable to me, and it's really helped me kind of understand their experience a lot more.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I've been teaching racism and Asian American studies within Catholic worship context.
Right.
And even after that xenophobic incident that occurred towards me, I had to do a little bit more research. Even though I knew a lot of the things that I was reading, but it forced me to go deeper into these issues because I knew I would need to talk about it. I would need to write about it. So it's what we do with these incidences, right? What do we do with them, and how do we, cooperate with the grace of God to hopefully move forward to a better world? Um, but we have to do our part. For me, it's music and education. It's not the only way
Sure.
we're gonna come to this just world, which we still hopefully need to continue to work towards. But but it's my contribution. I think we all have to, we all have to do something. I mean, haven't you felt? I've been feeling this as well. At the beginning of this pandemic, there was a need for people to do something good. But I don't know whether that was in the consciousness of everyone,
Yeah.
but my sense is people wanted to do something good. It's as if at our most tragic moments in human history, we want to do good, and of course, evil also occurs at the same time.
Right.
Conversively or compatibly with all of this. But I think for the most part, we want to contribute something and cooperate with God's grace in order to just build up this reign of God, where there is no racism, xenophobia, death, or illness.
Yeah. Evil's going to try so much harder to make us not do that, right?
Isn't that true? Isn't that true? And it comes out in different ways. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's up to us
yeah,
just to continue to move toward the light. And yeah, I know the
right.
incident that happened to you, Father Ricky, happened in New York City, which is my hometown. And so I hope that New Yorkers have at least been brave enough, as I will be brave enough to do, to say, I'm very sorry that it happened to you in our city.
Well, thanks. And that was good. That sort of surprised me. Part of my presumption. I'm moving to New York, pretty progressive city. And yet this happens. It was my first time I experienced that physical racism. So I experienced other forms of it, but not as physical.
Yeah.
And here it is, 3 blocks away from the church. So that's it's part of the paradox and the uncertainty of the times we live in. What do we do with all this? It's all mystery at one level, but we need to have hope. We can't let that be the last word, basically.
Well, your music and your preaching has always given us hope. So
Thank you.
thank you for
Thanks, bud.
that. And we'll continue praying for you. Please continue to pray for us.
Yeah, definitely. Always. Yeah. And God bless you in this ministry you're doing. I think it's great lighting up all the Polish. You're kind of a Paulist at heart. So so thanks for extending our charism and for preaching the word, what you do.
Thanks, and hopefully when I get ordained to the diaconate soon, I'll
Oh, I forgot.
become one of your Paulist affiliates at some point.
That'd be great. I
That'd
forgot
be
you're doing
great.
that. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. It was
Fantastic. Looking forward to that. Let
yeah.
us know the
Thanks.
ordination date.
Exactly. By the way, this is funny. Your ordination was one of my wife and I's first dates
Oh, I had no idea.
because
That is great.
she went to school at Syracuse with Father Dave Dwyer. And
Oh,
so
so she came down for that.
yeah, and
Did you?
I had just started working for the Paulist, and she goes, "You work for the Paulist? I think my friend's becoming a Paulist." And I was like, "Who's your friend?" She goes,
Oh, that
"Dave
is
Dwyer,"
great.
and I was like, "Oh my God, yes, Father Dave Dwyer." I said,
Wow. See, your Polish roots go deep. May
exactly.
it continue in your ordination in your diaconal state of being. That's fantastic.
Always, we'll always be connected in some way. And
Absolutely.
speaking of connections, we've been connected here on 5 Questions with the Paulist Fathers. Father Ricky Manalo, thank you so much for joining us and
God
giving us
bless,
so much of
Mike.
your time.
Bye, everyone.
You too.
Thanks.
Take care, folks. We'll see you next time.